In this set of videos, we're going to set up a Node.js Express site with a focus on authentication. We're going to use Passport, and so I'm going to walk you through the process of creating the site, setting up Passport, setting up our data in MongoDB, and using Mongoose to get that data. This is going to take a number of videos, and it's going to take a while. And so we'll get started and break this up into several pieces. This is not a simple thing to do. There's a lot of moving pieces. And so because we have lots of videos here, we're going to be probably making lots of mistakes along the way. And I won't edit those out. We'll walk through them, we'll debug them, and we'll see what all it takes to build a Express site with authentication, with Mongoose and MongoDB, and we'll use some other libraries along the way. So let's get started. Right now we're starting with basically nothing. I have my browser, I have my terminal, and I have Atom set up. So let's start from the very beginning. When we start a project, the first thing we want to do is create a Git repository. And since this is a Node project, go ahead and initialize our package.json. So we have our package.json here. We need a git ignore. So because we want to ignore the node modules folder. Okay, here we go. The first thing we want to start with, now that we have our package.json file and our Git repository set up, is let's go ahead and get started with Express. So Npm Install Express. For my server-side rendering, I'm going to use mustache templates, so I'm going to install mustache Express as well. Cool. We need a file for configuring the server. There it is. Let's get started putting everything together. We have our node modules here, but they should be ignored because of our git ignore. Let's go look at server.js. This is how you start a basic Express configuration. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you have some familiarity with Express. We are going to be walking through everything, and we're not going to be stopping to explain everything about Express along the way. But here's our basic setup. We create this app, we need to configure this app. We'll listen on a port. I think that one's probably not in use at the moment. Alright, so that will start the server, but doesn't really do much interesting because we haven't set up any paths, any static files, anything like that. Let's go ahead and set up static file handling because I'll want to have a CSS file. This means I can create a public folder like so, and I can put a style file in there for use in a bit. Alright, so I have my static files. Let's go ahead and set up Mustache. Now by default, if you use Mustache Express, what it's going to do when you set that up as your view engine is it's going to cache all the files, which will mean we'll have to restart our server more than I want to. So this is how you would set up Mustache Express to not cache your files. This is not good for a production site, but while you're in development, this works really well. So let's do it. We create an instance here. and we are going to set the cache to this to null. And that'll keep the cache from happening, and so every time we make a request to a mustache page, it will reread the file off the disk and re-template. So that'll be useful for us later on. Okay, mustache is now set up. For this site, what I want to do is set up 4 pages. I want to set up an index page, and we'll put some links to login, register, and home page, or 3 other pages. So the login page will not require authentication, because that is sometimes how you get authenticated. We will have a registration page, which will also not require authentication for the same reason. We are going to also have a home page, which we will put behind an authentication wall, where once we get authentication set up, people won't be able to get to that page unless they've logged in. So let's go ahead and create those. And what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and start this off with separating these out into separate files. And so we don't have everything here in the server file. So I'm going to create a folder for our routes. And create 2 files. One, I'm going to put our auth routes, meaning our login and our registration routes. I'm going to put those in there. And then I'm going to have another file for general routes. I'm going to put our root, our index page in there, as well as the home. Let's start with general. We're going to do this by using express routers. So we can create a router like so. And now in this router we can say router.get, and we will go ahead and set up our root path here. And we can say render the index file, which we haven't created yet. Router.get home This will render the home file, which we also don't have. We'll make those here in just a minute. And I want to export this so that in my server I can just do app.use and then right here do require and then say routes general. Auth still blank. General has those routes. Let's run this right now and see what we get. All right, localhost 3000. Does it work? Failed to look up view index and views directory. Okay, well, like I said, we haven't created the views, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll create our new views folder. And then create both an index, mustache view, and we will create a home mustache view. The basic shell of the page is going to be as follows. We are going to bring in our style sheet that I created. There's nothing in there yet, but we'll bring that in. Within the page, I'm going to have a div that's going to contain everything. Like so. And so we'll start with index, an index for the h1 and the title. And I'm going to use this same thing for home, except I will change home and index. Let's see if these work now. Our index works, our home works. This is the page that we will require people to be authenticated to view later. But right now, it's nice and viewable easily right here. If we go back to our index page, let's create some links to the other pages that we have created or are going to create. Okay, we now have our index page with a link to the home page, to login, which we haven't implemented yet, and register. So now let's go ahead and do those authenticated routes. Excuse me, do those routes so that we can set up our authentication, our login, and our registration. Same general procedures before, at least thus far. Things are going to get a lot different eventually. So we need a router. And for our router, we're going to need to set up a few routes. We'll just start with the gets for login and register. Later on, we will implement the posts. That will be in a different video. All right, we don't have a mustache file for that. We'll do that in a second. Nor do we have one for that. Let's export this so we can import it in the server file. Right under where we did the other. Okay. Let's see if this works. Looks like Nomon restarted the server, which is good. So index page won't lead to login because we still haven't created that view yet. Let's go ahead and do that now. There we go. Login now works. Register now works. Homepage works. Let's flesh out a little bit of the forms. We won't deal with the logic of posting. Let's just do a little bit of CSS and get things basically working and in good shape for that. So let's go to our CSS file, which I've already created. Here it is. For container, I'm going to have some styles. I'm also going to put some styles in the body. I want to give a background color for the whole body for that. And then for the container, I want to give it a background color of white. Now none of this is actually required for the functionality. I just want to do a little bit of styling so you can see what that's like if you haven't really done much Express. So now I've got styling. Obviously I need a lot more at this point. So let's add a little bit of padding inside the container. There we go. Let's also give this a border. Like so. And let's build a form. Start with the login form. The actual forms for both login and register are actually going to be the same. We'll just go ahead and start with it right here. Will be the same, at least in terms of their form elements. They will post to different locations, but same form elements. So I'm going to have a very simple registration and login that just takes a username and a password. For the form, give it a method of post action login. See how this looks? And looks kind of plain, but it's okay, I guess. Let's add a little bit of styling. For the forms that we have in the app, let's give them a border and a little padding. Maybe a little bit more padding and change that border code. Okay. So we have username, we have password. We can submit the form if we want to. Let's go ahead and take this form. Let's put a button as well before we leave here. And this is going to say login, because this is the login screen. There we go. Let's take the same form, let's bring it over to registration. We'll use it here with only minor changes. So login has a form, register now has a form. Homepage has practically nothing. Okay, so in this video we've installed Express, we've set up Mustache. We're not doing any special rendering with Mustache yet. We'll get there. We've set up Express, we've set up the views for our index page, login registration, and home, and we've set up basic static file handling. In our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to implement these forms and go ahead and get Mongoose installed, up and running, and get communication between our website and the database.